Hi everybody, welcome back to part 24 of the Trumpeter Bismarck build. When I left off last time, I'd put a lot of the detail into this aft superstructure, and this time I'm going to do a little bit more by building the 4 boats that fit on these crutches here above the hangar. These were transport boats. They were all identical, all 4. There were some different boats which went on the forward hangers next to the funnel, but we'll do those another time. So for this week, in this short episode, we're just going to concentrate on getting these 4 boats built using a combination of the Trumpeter hulls, and the rest is all made up from Pontos photo-etch. So let's get on with them. Okay, so we're going to be building the 4 boats that fit on this aft superstructure here on these 4 crutches. It's this style of boat here in the Trumpeter kit. These different style boats here fit on the roof of the hangars next to the funnel, a bit further forward. So we're just going to concentrate on these which have got the forward cabin. So I think we only need the hull from the Trumpeter kit, so we'll get those off and we'll see what photo etch we need to do with them. We'll just move this structure out of the way because, as you saw last week from the previous episode, there's lots of delicate railings on this now, so I don't want to distort those. These are what the boats will look like when they're built, hopefully. They're actually known as transportation boats. This is the Anatomy of the Ship book, and it's just helpful to show us what they should look like when they're finished. So looking at the Pontos instructions, we're building this boat here, L9. So there's a little bit of photo etch, and we're going to replace the plastic cabin with this one here in photo etch with the open windows, and I will try and fill those with some crystal clear or something like that to give the impression of glass once it's painted. So let's get some photo etch out and we'll start to put these things together. We'll start off with the decks. I'm just getting these to conform to the shape of the side of the hull. There's a rise in the boat's deck here, and Pontos help us with that with some fold lines, so just a very gentle bend in that deck. So these are the internals for the boats, and I'm just going to gradually make the bends on these just to make sure that they're going to fit into the deck. Okay, so eventually when that's folded up properly you end up with a tray with some benches around the aft side and the port and starboard as well, these log benches. So I'll repeat that with the other three and just make sure that this fits into the boat. So eventually this should fill up the space. Now it doesn't go in from the top, so I'll be attaching that from underneath, and I think I'll be soldering that. It's going to be very difficult to get a good join with super glue, so I'll just tack that on with some solder. But I'll get the other three folded up first and then we can come back to that. Next we'll do some benches. These are the centre benches. So these will drop in the middle like that. Okay, so I'm just going to fix these together now. And I'll solder this internal part onto the deck from underneath. But first of all, you've got to obviously position it properly. And to help me do that, I'll just get some tape. And then with that done, you can obviously just turn it over and get it ready for soldering. And I'm not bothered about getting a bead of solder all the way around. I just want to tack it in 4 or 5 different places. So just apply a bit of flux. And I like to cut some little pellets of solder. It's surprising how little solder is needed to complete these joins. A tiny 0.5 mm pellet like that will do all the way along this join. So that's nice and strong. You wouldn't be able to do that with glue. It just wouldn't hold the part. There's not enough contact surface area to be able to do that. But the solder's, as I said, nice and strong. The thing with using solder and flux particularly is that you've got to make sure that it's clean afterwards. Paint won't stick to the flux because it's kind of a grease really. So you've got to clean that up, and actually what I will do later on off camera when I come to put the undercoat on this, or the primer, is I'll put some gun cleaner or some cellulose thinners through the airbrush and blast the brass to make sure that all the grease is removed. As I said, otherwise the primer just lifts. It appears to go on, and then once it really dries solid it'll start to chip off, which obviously you don't want. So it's worth giving this a good clean up once you've soldered the parts together. So I'll just do the last one, then we can fit some of the detail onto these parts. Okay, I'll wash these down now, make sure all that flux is removed, and then I think the sequence I want to follow is to fit these to the holes. I'll be able to paint the deck parts and the holes separately. Should be easy enough without any masking. And doing it that way means that I can make sure that the edge of the deck is properly sealed. So let's get these cleaned up first, then we can glue them together. Okay, so we'll fit these now. They've all been cleaned up. So that just tidies up around the edge, gets it sealed. Because once you get primer on this, you don't want to be seeing gaps along the edge of the boat's deck there. These are the bollards. There are 3 on each boat, well, 3 pairs on each boat. And here I'm just clearing the location holes because they sit over the top of the plastic underneath. So I'm just clearing that out to make sure that these bollards will fit in alright. These are the centre benches. Okay, we'll fit the last of these cabins now, and there is a method that I like to use for these. The frames at the side obviously fold down and they connect up around the perimeter of the cabin roof, but I don't do it like that. I don't fold them all down at once. I find the best way is just to fold the side pieces down, these two side frames, and the central frame here at the front. Just adjust those side frames until they're the correct width. So you have the part like that, two side frames folded down, and then I'll just secure the two side frames and the front. Now once the side frames are secure, then it's possible to bend the other four frames down, and what happens is that they clip into the little groove that's etched into the ship's deck or the boat's deck. And they all line up properly at that stage. You can just adjust them until they all sit properly. Okay, so the cabins have gone on fairly well actually. They're sometimes a little bit difficult, but using that method of just fixing the two side frames seems to work. It just makes it a little bit easier, I think. These rails go on the cabin roof. These are the rudders, which we just need to fold in half. Okay, so I'm ready to paint these boats now. You can see that I've gone ahead and fitted the last of the detail parts. So I've fitted some steps port and starboard just behind the cabin, and the staffs as well for the front and back of the boats. Now, I don't think that the rear staff will fit on the positions where we've got the signals bridge, because the boat goes underneath the signals bridge, and I think that obstructs, so I'm going to have to take that off. And actually that's not a big deal, because the staffs wouldn't have been deployed on the boats when they were stowed away, so it's no big deal to take those off. So they're ready for painting. Now there's all sorts of sequences you could use to paint these boats. There are three main colours: a black underside, the pale grey of the rest of the superstructure I'm going to use for the hull sides, and a dark brown for the decks and cabins. Then there's just a bit of detail painting of the bench tops in a slightly different colour, a leathery colour. So you could do that in any sequence. The way that I'm going to tackle it is to paint the brown first, and the reasoning for that is that you're going to be doing an awful lot more work with the airbrush to get into all the detail underneath the cabin and inside the cabin. And you've got more chance of getting overspray onto a painted surface at the side with all that work with the airbrush. So I'll get that done, and then it's possible to paint the grey by just angling the airbrush upwards so that it doesn't catch the deck itself. So that's the sequence I'm going to use, and then finish off with the black, and we'll see how that goes. So I'll crack the airbrush out, we'll get that brown on first of all. Okay, the brown's gone on okay. That's Tamiya XF79 linoleum deck brown, which is a nice rich chestnut colour. So the next job is to paint the undersides, and for that I'm going to be using Tamiya's lacquer rubber black. This is the tedious part of painting boats, which is masking off the water lines, and in this case I've put tape around the top as well to stop the grey going onto the cabin. So I'm going to use some XF19 for this. This is the sky grey that I'm using for the rest of the ship. So let's get the grey on and see how the masking's worked. Okay, that's not bad. I've just a little bit of touching up. I've got some grey overspray on the underside. Generally that's come out okay. I've just got to go around the top here where I've masked the brown off, and I've got to bring the grey right up to the edge of the deck, so I'll hand brush paint that. But okay so far. I'll get the other 3 masked up and painted, and then we can do those little touch-ups. Just a little bit of touch-up now along the edge of the hull, using some of the grey. So this just smartens up the join with the deck. I find with boats that they're very difficult to mask, and I generally end up going backwards and forwards with the colours until I'm happy with the finish on them. So they're fairly time consuming to make up. That's all the touch-ups done, and I'm happy with how they've turned out. The last thing to do with them before glazing the windows is to give these an overall coat of Mr. Colour or Mr. Hobby GX flat varnish. So I'll do that now, and then we can look at getting those windows done. Okay, so we'll do some glazing now. I'm using micro crystal clear. It's really worth trying to do this on boats. They don't look as good without the windows in. These are about at the limit for crystal clear. As you can see, it's not going on that easily. So we have to wait for that to dry now, obviously, and hopefully when it does we'll have some nice glazed windows. I'm going to just fit these benches or bench tops. Just to finish these boats off, I'll fit the propellers. These are from the Pontos set, although Trumpeter do provide these as well. Okay, so I'm happy with those. I've just got the glazing to do on a couple of the boats. 2 of them are done, and I'm just waiting for those to dry thoroughly at the moment. But I'll call that done for this week, and hopefully next time I'll get them fitted onto the aft superstructure. These, as I said at the beginning of the video, they go above the aft hangars on the ship. So I'll be doing that next time in part 25 next Friday. So I hope you can join me for that one, everybody. In the meantime, look after yourselves, stay safe, and I'll see you in another week. Bye for now.